Give me one sec. All right, it is 3:02 and I'm calling the July 21st, 2020 special meeting for the Board of Directors open. The purpose of this meeting is to conduct a study session about COVID-19 impacts in reopening schools. Before I pass things off to Superintendent Kolaski and her leadership team, I wanted to take a few minutes for some general comments. Your school board and leadership team, led by Donna Kolaski, including Dr. Fred Rendell, Jamie Prescott, Nova Williams, Ty Bergstrom, Aaron Battersby, Dr. Suam Booby, Tony Kuhn, and Andrews Ronser, as well as our principals, have been working tirelessly to plan for the upcoming school year. Our board directors participate in weekly updates and information sessions with WASDA, the Washington State School Directors Association, where we obtain the latest updates on health directives, funding, and educational requirements determined by the State Board of Education and the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. We have been meeting weekly with a group of board directors from several Eastside school districts, Bellevue, Lake Washington, Issaquah, and North Shore, in an effort to share information, insights, and ideas in order to effectively learn from public health and advocate with other entities on behalf of all Eastside students. We have had dozens of people meeting regularly on the Learning Forward teams that included our leadership team, principals, teachers, staff, parents, and students. This meeting today is a study session for the board to receive updates on the work group's progress on the reopening plan. There will be no action taken today. All board meetings, with minor exceptions, are open to the public, and we encourage everyone interested to attend. These meetings are all noticed by law and publicized on the district website under the school board tab. We welcome individual PTAs, Facebook groups, and others to post when these meetings are and what are learned from them. Also, on the district website are minutes and recorded videos of each meeting. The board is and has been meeting constantly since March regarding issues dealing directly with COVID, in addition to our regular twice-monthly meetings. The board continues to review each and every email received. We depend on the community to provide feedback and know that we consider all input. I want us to focus moving forward with 3 presumptions. Number 1, students are the priority. Every decision made is considered in light of how it will impact students. We all want the same thing, to provide the safest and most effective learning system possible for each one of our students. We are aware of the vast variety of individual needs that our students have and are committed to doing everything in our power to provide for those needs. Number 2, we are fortunate to have the most dedicated teachers, staff, and administrative teams impacting our young learners. I am constantly impressed with the ingenuity, commitment, and strong desire to do the best they can for our kids. These past 6 months and this coming school year will look nothing like what we all were hoping for. This is an ongoing process with many issues at play. We will continue to work tirelessly to meet the needs of every student and family. And number 3, assume good intent. We are going to have successes and we are going to have failures. We are all doing the best we can. We cannot succeed without the support of our community of parent groups, students, teachers, staff, administrative teams, and community partners. We need and want to receive feedback about what is working, what is not working, and what can be improved. It is most helpful when the feedback is constructive, with specific examples about how we can better meet the needs of all students. Please avoid denigrating any group or individual when making suggestions to improve for the future. Again, the information provided today will be a summary to the board of what is happening in the Learning Forward work groups. Things are changing constantly, but we know everyone benefits from learning how decisions are being made and what information is being relied upon. Board meetings are scheduled as needed, so please follow the information on the website for the latest information. As a summary, the upcoming meetings we have scheduled are July 23rd from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. is a study session to discuss fundamentals 4 through 6. August 6th at 5 p.m. is a special meeting for an update on school plans for the 2020-2021 school year. August 11th at 5 p.m., special meeting / study session for community members to ask questions, provide input to the board regarding the proposed plan. At that meeting, people will be able to participate directly. The district is planning on information sessions for staff and parents in the next 2 weeks. The board receives regular updates regularly. We encourage providing feedback to the board at the email address for our board, which is board@mercerislandschools.org. We are so fortunate to live in a community that values education above all else. I am confident that we will rise to this challenge and provide our students the safest and most enriching education possible for the 2020-2021 school year. So with that, I will pass things off to our superintendent, Donna Kolaski, and her learning services team.
Thank you. I did note the call to order was at approximately 3:05, so just so we have that for the record as well. We don't have to establish an agenda or anything because it is a study session, but I just wanted to note that. So as you can see, we have several members of our leadership team here who are going to support in giving you the updates, but we want to keep them relatively concise so we can leave some time for you to ask questions and give input. As mentioned, we have several work groups that were established early on to meet and determine what reopening was going to look like. The challenges within this have been that the health crisis has continued to evolve. The pandemic is still very much at the forefront of all of our thinking and our work as we move forward. We do have some guidance and regulations that have been given to us from OSPI when they worked in partnership with the Department of Health and also with Department of L&I at the state level that outline the health regulations that we must have in place for staff. So I just really want to reiterate, and I think President Lurie said it very well, school is not going to look the same. That is something we as educators actually struggle with. Even in-person learning that we all covet so greatly is going to look very different. The health and safety requirements require students to wear face coverings as well as all adults or anyone else who comes in the building. That in and of itself creates a different environment. We will have to do a health attestation for anyone who is entering our buildings. That initially became extremely difficult to figure out. We needed to work through how that would look. We then got some further clarification working with public health and our school nurses who were able to get clarification that it can be an attestation. So we don't have to physically take everyone's temperature as an example when they come in the room. So we actually have a little bit of a silver lining there. We're working with a software company in a large consortium, either including the SIPSI, which is our Student Information System Collaborative, as well as the ESDs, to bring on board a software platform that would allow everyone to do that attestation, parents for students and staff in an online mode. So we would be able to have students have that done before they ever enter the building, same with staff. So working towards having that in place. The other health requirements are really a change in culture and climate. If we're allowed to come back in the buildings, we have to reinforced greatly that we are at a different time and space health-wise, and no one should be coming into contact with others if they are not able to affirm all of the pieces on the health attestation, which includes the symptoms of COVID-19, and encouraging people to stay home if they have those, whether it's students or staff. So that's going to be a big lift in and of itself that we'll continue to work on educating folks for as we come back to our buildings. The next big requirement within the OSPI guidelines, particularly for health and safety, is what we're now calling physical distancing. It has been set at a 6-foot mark, and they are not bending on this. So as we began our planning and started to look at what did that look like, our facilities team did an amazing job of getting into our classrooms at each level and really measuring and trying to figure out how many bodies can we fit in where there's a 6-foot head-to-head space between them. It ranges between 14 and 16, which is much smaller than we have as our class size now. And that presented a lot of challenges as we thought about how could we open our buildings with only 14 to 16 students in a class. Also want to remind everyone how this is going to look different as we talk about this. Those desks for students are individual desks, being able to use tables with more than one student at them. Sitting at that table becomes problematic because of that 6 foot. We also won't be able to have students working in small groups. We won't be able to have our youngest learners doing things like carpet time, teachers pulling small groups of students, all of those extras that we know are pedagogically sound and really what enhances our learning won't be available to us in any kind of in-person setting. So don't want to create too bleak of a picture, but I just really want to remind people that any model that we are moving to is going to be very different than what school looked like for anyone in any setting prior to COVID-19. That being said, we have a lot of other pieces that we are continuing to work with and discuss in our work group, in our safety and health group. We talk about face coverings, how we will provide them, but we also want people to be comfortable with their face coverings, so they would be able to bring their own. We have worked through a flow chart for parents as to if their child is going to be in person, what are the things they need to consider as they do the health attestation, and what are their next steps for how long their child would have to stay at home. So putting that in a format that's very clear and easy for parents to understand for any in-building learning that might occur. We have created a kind of a separate website, a landing spot for all of our reopenings. So thank you to our tech department, to Andreves, and our communications coordinator for coordinating that. That's a great place for all of our community to look when they're looking for what's next and what are some of the things that we've already considered and what are we using as the tools for our considerations as we work through this. If you look on there, you will see our original draft of, we know that we still, even today, are going to need a flexible plan that allows us to move quickly to a space of everyone out of our buildings, as well as to a space where we are able to utilize our buildings to some extent for small groups in learning environments that encourage the best that we can do in that space, certainly health and safety, but also allowing for our staff and our students to have some in-person contact. So we continue to talk about RED as being that online, that remote learning, that every student is participating in a distance learning model. We tasked our learning forward work groups, one at elementary, one at middle, and one at high school, comprised of principals, staff members, teachers, parents, and at the high school students, to really push on the problem of what does remote learning, as Dr. Rundle likes to call it, 2.0 look like? A more robust model? What did we learn from the input of our parents and our teachers as we move towards having that in place and ready to go, potentially at the start of the year, most likely at the start of the year, I think I have to reiterate, as well as being able to pivot. If this virus is not flattened and contained, could there be a directive at a higher level, just like Governor Inslee did back in March, in closing all schools because the cases are escalating again? So that's the online model. And in just a little bit, we're going to have each of our teams talk to you about the scheduling and the work that they've done on that. We talked a lot about Orange, and a lot of districts have defined that as a hybrid model where you have an A-B model where you have 50% of the kids in and 50% of the students learning at home online. And as we began to grapple with that, we found it really problematic. We felt that in actuality, a red model was more time for learning for students because they were going to be in a learning setting 5 days a week versus an A-B model where they would really only be getting assurance of direct contact with teachers 2 days a week when they were in person. The 3 days became very much an independent learning model that we were struggling with greatly, because teachers, remember, in an A-B model would be working with their students 4 days a week, 2 days with one group, 2 days with the other group. That makes them inaccessible to that other group when they're in class. So as we grappled with that, we really came to a different place last week with our leadership team, and I know the conversations have started with the Learning Forward work groups, that the Orange, or the bringing students into our schools, is more of a blended learning model where the majority of the essential learning, the core curriculum, will occur in that online model, and groups of students, small groups, that when we can safely bring them into our buildings, they will come in a very scheduled way, still going in and complying with all of the health and safety standards of face coverings and physical distancing and health attestations, all of those pieces, with the eventuality of moving to a place that we've called yellow, where we've got our students in person, in classrooms, with all still those health parameters in place, but they're in person regularly. That becomes tricky, particularly at our secondary classes, because of the class size. So having, we staff at about a 28-to-1 number, but when you're building a comprehensive high school master schedule, that means your numbers fluctuate for a variety of reasons. And you have classes that sit 32, 33. Last year we had some at 34. And if you're just going to split your kids in half, now you can't even fit 50% in on 2 days. So we're really doing a reimagine of the Orange as a space where we can safely bring kids in. Small groups won't look the same for every kid. A lot of it will be based on the individual needs of students. One of the things that we've also made a strong commitment to is our youngest learners. And I think this was messaged in our community message that went out on Friday to all of our families, that we are going to do everything we can to safely bring our youngest learners, our kindergartners, into our buildings. We believe we can put them in classrooms that provide that physical distancing at each of our elementary schools. We are also very mindful of bringing our students with our most significant needs into our buildings as well, and working through that. So we really potentially could have, if we are allowed by public health, to have those students, those youngest students, and students with significant needs in a yellow model, whereas the majority of our students, 1st through 12, we're going to work on 1st grade, and we think we can maybe even get there with 1st grade being in yellow as well. But that would make the majority of our students in an online red model to really start the school year off. So that being said, I am going to turn it to Fred, I think, to guide through the each of the Learning Forward groups to give you an overview of the schedules that they've built.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent Koloski, and to our admin team and others who are here. Appreciate your time. What we thought it for organizational purposes is to start with our most important teams, our elementary, middle, and high school, and allow them to talk about what Superintendent Koloski just talked to you about, which is as we look and anticipate that the opening of school is going to be in that red remote learning, we thought it would be best to start there and give you an indication of what we're thinking and what the teams have been conceptualizing as a red learning day. So we'll start with elementary, then build the middle and high school, and then I'll give the learning services a chance to talk about the support that we're providing through special services, assessment, technology, professional development. And then Superintendent Koloski, I'll have you kind of figure out, measure the temperature of how much operations we want to cover versus getting into questions. So with us, our two administrator leads for the elementary team have been Principal David Hoffman and Principal Amy Batliner-Gillette. So I'd like to turn it over to them at this time and have them talk about how we're imagining a red learning day and proposing it, at least at this time, based on the team's work.
Hi, Fred, and good afternoon, everyone. Is everyone seen the model, or do I need to share my screen? Or Fred, how is that going to work?
You can go ahead and share the screen.
All right, let me see if I can pull this up. That's not. Oh, I know why. 1 second. Okay. Let me see. Can everybody see this now? And let me know if I need to scroll up. So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for providing us with the opportunity to share our latest thinking. And when I say our, I really speak, I'm sure for Amy also, that I want to thank the members of our Elementary Learning Forward team, and that would be all the staff we're working with and our wonderful parents who have spent many days also working with us. We also looked at the numerous surveys that were completed by our community when we were creating this, this draft model. We heard loud and clear from our community is that they wanted something that was consistent and predictable, and that focused on essential learning, and that they were able to see their children's teachers every day in synchronous learning blocks. And so I think what we've created for this draft is very family friendly and addresses those needs. So as you can see, we'll just scroll down beginning at 8:30 to 9:15 would be the time that we would be meeting with our staffs to do those things like staff meetings, our BGT, our building guidance teams, some of those other group dynamics that we do when we are in our buildings. Our school day would begin at 9:15 like it does now, and it would begin with all of our students checking in for attendance to receive morning announcements, greetings from their teachers. And soon thereafter, you can see our first hour block of instruction. So let me preface the hour blocks. You will see there'll be 3 of them in this model. They're an hour. That does not mean that students are on their screen for an hour, because we do know that that is a lot of screen time. What it means would be that the teachers would be providing perhaps a mini lesson or read aloud if it was a literacy block, and then breaking out into small groups or one-on-one work with students while they were completing some of the tasks that they were assigned, which is what we do in a regular classroom. We would allow the grade levels to determine what would happen during each of these hour blocks, again, focusing on the essentials, which we see as reading, writing, and math. There would be opportunities, obviously, to bring in science and social studies, but we know that it's really important that we address the essential learnings in the areas of literacy and in math. This is also premised on the fact that we will be assessing all the students at the beginning of the school year, and that's another subgroup that is working on how that will work so that we know exactly the levels that our students are arriving to school with. We take a small break at 10:30 for 15 minutes, and then we have our second instructional block. So a grade level team might decide that it's going to be math during this time or writing during this time. Again, it's an hour. That does not mean that the students are in front of their screen for an hour, but again, it would be a small lesson. And then there would be breakout sessions to work with small groups of students in the breakout rooms or some one-on-one work. We also anticipate that we would be supported during these times with paras and other staff that are available to support students. We then move on to lunch, and we are also working with our middle school and high schools to make sure that lunch is an opportunity for those families that need to go pick up a lunch. They would have ample time to go out and get their lunches and come back. So we've backed it up with what we are calling conferring and family support time. So these would be times where families could check in with their teachers, prearrange some times so that they could get some help on anything that is of concern to them in supporting their children. And then we start our third and final hour instructional block at 12:45, similar to the models that you saw in the morning. It might be math, it might be reading, it might be a combination of a few things that need to also be addressed, science. The SEL work, so that's our second step, mindfulness, things like that can also be scattered throughout the day. We then take a break, and our final portion of the day is set aside for working one-on-one with students. It would be times perhaps where we have a specialist would be providing their services, and again, times where teachers will need some planning to prepare for their work each day. And then you can see on Wednesdays, they might provide during that time, which would usually be the early release day for us, some asynchronous learning for students so that we can do some professional development with our staffs. So that's in a nutshell. This was a proposed specialist learning opportunity. You can see that final block after the third instructional block where the specialists would then provide each grade level with art, library, Spanish, PE opportunities from 2 to 3:30. So Amy, if I've forgotten something before, obviously we would welcome questions.
If you just scroll back up for just a moment, the only thing that I would add is another consideration for within those instructional blocks, the 3 instructional blocks, as well as that time from 2 to 3:45, is that just as occurs typically when we're in brick and mortar schools, when we're live and in person, we do have building master schedules, and that would come into play here as well, so that students who receive additional support services designated by an IEP or for English language learning support or for the learning support program, so that as a school we would have a consistent time within those blocks that our teachers could collaborate with the other service providers and make sure that they're coordinated as to when those special services are provided. So there'll be some master scheduling to go along with that, as well as some flexibility for teachers within that master schedule to meet the needs of the kids in front of them that are in their rooms. That's it.
President Lurie, do you want to take, have each individual work group take questions or save them till the end? How do you think time-wise would be the best way to approach that?
I think that we should hear at least reports from all of the 3 groups so that each gets their time, and we can see what time it is at the end of that and then make another determination, unless someone feels strongly otherwise. Looking for a green. Okay, I can't necessarily.
I'll stop. Great.
Okay, I think we're good with that plan. All right.
So thank you, David and Amy. Let's have our middle school. I don't know if you've decided who's going to screen share. But if one of you would take that on and walk us through what our middle school Learning Forward work group has drafted.
Sure. So we'll go ahead and get started. All three of us are here. And so we'll kind of tag team things. I'll take the lead, and then Weston and Mary Jo, feel free to add things that I've missed. Our plan has come to fruition through many, many meetings, both our IMS staff as well as our Learning Forward team. I'm pleased to say that all three of our parent Learning Forward team members are here with us today on this chat. Gwen Loosemore, Dawn Dunn, and Pam Hinnon. So we want to thank you for your work. In addition to all the staff members that were there, we also, as David said, looked at the feedback from parents and in making this. And what we heard is similar feedback about consistency. We've also heard the value of instructional blocks of time where teachers and students are engaging in the content together. And we've also heard the value of professional development time for teachers to make sure that the kids are getting the essential standards that are needed and a common experience. So those are three of the main tenets you'll see throughout this program that you're starting to see on the screen. Similar to the elementaries, you'll see a lot of common themes. We have in the morning, starting at 7:50 to 8:30, we have student services time. That's where we will have our meetings with parents in terms of IEPs or BGT for special education services. Also, it'll be communication time between general education staff and special education staff to make sure we're meeting the needs of those students. You'll see that school starts every day at 8:35 with morning announcements. Those can be done via either video or document pushed out to students, but the expectation is they're reading that every morning. And then you'll see in that 8:45 to 12 o'clock block, consistent interactions between teachers and students. So on Monday, you'll see that all the kids go through all 6 of their classes for a quick 25-minute period of time. That's to kind of set up the week to have teachers talk to kids about where all the stuff is on the learning management system. Talk about some of the assignments for the week, what's going to happen, the general scope and sequence for the week. So you'll see there are 25-minute sections there with a break in the middle. And then you'll see Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we go back and forth with 55-minute periods of time where attendance is taken, and those are instructional blocks where kids and students are working together with the content. We would not expect a 55-minute direct instruction period. There might be, as David said earlier, might be a mini lesson, and then kids go off and make meaning of that content and then come back together and reflect, work with partners in breakout rooms, things like that. But the value of those instructional blocks and those 55-minute periods of time, we heard loud and clear is something that parents and teachers want to have happen. So you'll see that rotation through Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Following that, we do have a 45-minute lunch period. The reason why for the elongated lunch period is obviously we want to have an adequate time for kids and staff members to eat, but also we're going to encourage kids to get up and get moving, get some physical breaks, but also that might be an opportunity for us to run some different clubs and activities similar to what we do in a regular school environment. Following that, we understand that kids are going to have questions and need some support, questions answered. So we do have a half-hour office hours section from that 12:45 to 1:15. It says optional for most students because we understand that some students that need remediation and or challenge might be asked by a teacher to come for some extra support and or extension. So it might not be optional, might be asked for some kids to come. In addition, at 1:15, you'll see a time where for the students across the top of that band here, it's student work time. We're going to have paraprofessionals available to support students in their academic learning. We also really see this time where our special education specialists, our OTs and our PTs and our speech therapists can really work with the students and not pull them out of the instructional blocks. So we're really trying to hold that instructional block time as sacred. So Kids can get support during that time, as well as kids that need ELL support. We also have some counselor check-ins throughout that time. We have our district directed time where we work with staff on professional development on Mondays. And then you'll see on Fridays where my cursor is, we're going to add something called student seminars where we work on social emotional experiences with kids, work on executive functioning like time management and organization. When we need to do celebrations and or recognition such as Veterans Day, assembly, that would happen there. And then you'll see Friday afternoon, we would like teachers to spend some time posting out to families, just a general scope, what's going to happen next week. So they're aware of that. Finally, you'll see at 2:30, you will see another set of office hours. We originally had thought one office hour, one hour office hour would be good, but then we realized that kids have questions at different times. And so some might have questions before they start the work, and some might have questions after they've done the work, or they still need some things solidified. So we do have that second office hour section from 2:30 to 3, and then the teacher day ends at the regular time at 3:20. So that's kind of what we're thinking. Once again, that consistency, the opportunity for the instructional blocks, the professional development time that you'll see here for teams to meet are all kind of the common themes that we took into consideration in building this plan. Mary Jo, Weston, things I missed, things you'd like to add?
No, I want to thank Aaron for his diligence in making draft after draft after draft after draft of our schedules based on lots of feedback and insight from both our Learning Forward team and our Islander staff as a whole. I do want to address the fact that Gator time is not encompassed in this red schedule. And it's heartbreaking, but also understandable because we worked so hard to bring that in and think it is so valuable for our kids in a real brick and mortar experience. Online, it did not play out the way it did in the building. And we have replaced it with this idea of the student seminars where we think we can still provide valuable support and SEL and fun and school-wide culture building just in a unique way when we're in this online experience. So I just wanted to be clear about that. The Gator time won't disappear forever, just in the online world.
Weston, anything to add from your end?
No, I think you covered it. Really grateful to the Learning Forward team and to our staff team for the work on this, and thank you for presenting it.
All right, I'll stop sharing at this point in time. There you go.
Thank you, middle school team. We're going to move now to the remote learning, the distance learning, the red as you want to call it, with our high school team. And Walter Kelly is going to present what draft we have from our high school work group, which is probably our largest work group too, I believe, and includes students.
It does. Thank you, Donna. I appreciate it. Can everybody hear me? Great. I want to first, as somebody relatively new to the job, it's great to start with a really tangible problem we've got to work on together. It has allowed us to start getting to the work quickly and getting to know each other well. I want to thank our parent voices, our students who participated diligently with several meetings, and particularly a few people on our staff who contributed above and beyond, certainly not limited to, but I want to thank Nick Wold for working as a co-chair and transition on this work. Thanks to Lisa Dean, who's one of our new associate principals, who's really worked on a lot of the organizational piece, a lot of the documents and assessment tools we've used. Thanks to Clay Laurie also for a lot of work specifically on the subcommittee for scheduling, and Michelle Hayes and Ed Puhala, who've done some specific work with feedback, which has been very helpful to what we've done. Want to share the overview of the high school team, our process for schedule, then I'll walk through the schedule briefly. First, the high school team is broken up into one large team of, I think, 32. It's in the 30s. It's a large group. So our work groups include one subcommittee on scheduling, which is coming to a close here pretty soon. We also have one on grading and assessment that is just starting, and two that are starting this coming week on virtual common expectations for technology for teachers and students, and also for attendance and student engagement, because we really see attendance as a data point of engagement, a fairly low-level data point. We want to go above and beyond that, see how we can reach and really engage students. When we received the initial student and parent feedback, we heard three things. We heard we want strong academic content with live virtual teaching, interacting with our students. Number two, that we had a focus on student wellness and the student sense of belonging. That's such an important part of a high school. And third, that there's consistency in the use of technology tools and the platform that we utilize and how we utilize it, so that parents and students are not spending a lot of time trying to negotiate the technical side so they can get to the academic side. With those, the process that we use to get to our red schedule, first we brainstorm schedules. Two, we prioritized what we felt were the most essential functions of high school. Third, we looked at how those functions were able to be carried out on a virtual environment, how difficult that was or how easy that was. Then we drafted those models. We took formal feedback from the entire committee. We discussed that feedback, sent it back to subcommittee, and what you're about to see is draft 4 of that model. So I'm going to share my screen, and let me walk through a few highlights of that. Okay, can everybody see the screen? So the highlights of it, we're looking really at Monday.
I can't see your screen yet.
Okay, let me try that again. Share. How's that?
That's perfect.
Okay, good. Thank you. So let me move that up a little bit for everybody to see. You see
you also, one more thing. Could you zoom in just a little bit? If you look right underneath the, yep, there you go, perfect.
Okay. So you see that the times are color-coded. I'll give the overview and then I'll walk through that. First, this does include 15.5 hours of live virtual learning. That does not mean 15.5 hours of direct lecture time. That means where the students are engaged with teacher online with them. It involves 6 hours of office time for students to contact their teachers, 90 minutes of targeted student time, which specifically means students that are struggling. We know they're at risk, or we understand that there's content they're struggling with. Teachers and our staff can work with them. 5.5 hours of collaborative planning time and lesson development time, which we're hearing and understandably realizing the amount of time that it takes for teachers to develop lessons that they've traditionally done live takes that time to do with quality. Secondly, it involves 2 hours and 45 minutes of teacher time where they're actually working directly on the tasks involved. That includes the teacher-directed time on Wednesday and Friday morning, and also the posting of the week's agenda and materials on Friday afternoon. And so each week, that does mean that students and parents would be able to see what's upcoming for the following week by that point at the latest. What Monday would look like for a student is they would have brief check-in times for 25 minutes for every class for a total of 3.5 hours. It'll be shotgun. It's simply checking with students, framing the work for the week, and giving possibly some initial high-level instruction or conceptual instruction. As the week moves forward, you see that there's a Tuesday, Thursday, 1, 3, 5, 7 block, and a Wednesday, Friday, 2 Island Hour 4, 6 block. Again, this is live. We also, again, do not expect that that would be all direct teacher just sitting and listening to the teacher speak. There should be lessons and engagement and assessments to see how students are doing moving forward with that. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. I think everybody's got it. I'm going to talk through what we're kind of pivoting on, to use Donna's term. We also have fully developed an orange schedule, which would, as Donna is describing, have half the students in the building for 2 days a week. And that does have its inherent challenges. We have developed that. We're finalizing it in case that becomes something we move to. But what's more likely is an orange-red model. So if we are able to have students in the building under very limited context, so one, the red is set, but if we have to move to an orange-red or get to have students in the building, what we have determined is that the academic side is dealt with fairly effective virtually. In fact, there is more instructional time on a red model than an orange model. But what we've lost is that point of contact, a group of students that know each other, support each other, and at least one trusted adult that students touch base with live and physically if their family and health allows. So our orange-red model would then utilize the Islander hour piece. Probably we would increase that time by compacting some other things so that it's about an hour and a half to 2 hours in length. And we would rotate 4 different groups through. So it would be a quarter of our student body Tuesday, a quarter Wednesday, quarter Thursday, quarter Friday. And with that, we'd be focusing very much like the middle school with their work, focusing on 3 things: making sure that we are providing some group activities for that social connectivity, that there's a trusted adult who serves as an academic concierge to help them solve those problems, and that third, we're working with executive function, organizational, and time management skills during that time. So that red-orange, that in between, would increase that Islander hour by a little bit, and we're finalizing that this week. The rest of our subcommittees do involve, back to it. The rest of our subcommittee work will be reporting their drafts no later than the end of next week. And so we should have some guidance and where we're going with regards to grading, assessment, attendance, engagement, and last but not least, what are the common expectations teachers, students, parents, and staff have for the use of technology. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
So that being each of our grade bands, each of our level teams, I would like to ask Jamie Prescott, before we turn it over to questions, to just address where our thoughts and our determinations are in the red model as to a learning management system and platform.
Sure. So our secondary schools both use Schoology, and after spending time, we've explored a variety of different options. We hear everything from you should do Teams, Google Classroom, you should go to Canvas, and there were mixed reviews on every different platform from other districts over the course of the spring. And the reality is we've used Schoology now for 8 years. We're going into our 9th year. And this is the platform that our teachers have become accustomed to. It's what our students have become accustomed to. And so we know that we have some improvements to do there as far as streamlining and communication, but we're going to stick with that for secondary and really work to promote and provide some PD for Schoology for staff as they prepare for the coming year. For elementary, we got feedback about the grids, and I don't know that David and Amy touched on the fact that we're not leveraging grids like we did previously in this new remote learning. But the feedback was that became cumbersome for families. And so we're going to be we're still looking at Seesaw for K1, maybe K2, as the primary delivery model for information and resources for students. And then we're in the process of vetting whether or not we would like to move fully to Google Classroom for 3-5 and perhaps moving down to 2nd grade. So we're working on that. We had a number of teachers pilot Google Classroom in grades 3-5 in the spring and found much success. Additionally, it's being used right now in elementary summer school with great success and good feedback. And so we're exploring those. We meet as a team on Thursday, led by Ann Reeves, and we will be finalizing that. So we heard loud and clear about the grids, and we are working on that, and we're trying to streamline and improve the services we have and know for our secondary.
So one of the things we were going to do is talk you through kind of the different learning services team, but in the interest of at least giving you as a board a chance to talk and have your conversation and then also ask questions, it'll probably be easier for our team as questions are posed to kind of weave in how technology has supported, which is what Jamie was touching on, but also thinking about special services, special education, and elements there, more professional development questions than anything else. So probably easiest to feather those things in along with facilities. And Donna, I'll turn it back to you to hand it back to the board from there.
I am unmuted. Good. So just to kind of wrap it up and send it back to you to questions, we'll have everyone here to help answer those questions. We have really attempted to build a robust online model. We also are planning in our elementary group, working with Tony and our facilities and also with our health and safety folk as to how can we bring our youngest learners into our elementary schools. As I said at the beginning, if we are going to be allowed to do that based on King County Public Health, we don't know if there will be different determinations, but at this time we believe that we will be able to definitely have kindergarten in the building. We might need to move some things around to accommodate that. And pretty sure, depending on enrollment numbers, but they seem to be sitting in a space where we believe we can also have our first graders. As the board saw when the Friday memo went out, had a fair amount of parents reach back saying, you know, we think it's great you're thinking about bringing the kindergartners in. What's the potential of bringing our first graders in too? And don't disagree, as a former kindergarten and first grade teacher, when you're teaching beginning reading to very young learners, attempting to do it in an online platform is going to be a real struggle. Not to say that in our new normal of physical distancing and face masks and many of the other things that we're going to have to put in place as health and safety requirements, it's still going to be difficult, but we do still strongly believe that having our youngest and our most significantly impacted students in our buildings in that in-person learning environment. Questions?
Before we start with questions, well, I guess I'm asking the first question. Can you briefly touch on, are you having an online only learning model for students who we know absolutely will not be returning to school this year? Would this be an appropriate time to just briefly mention that?
Yeah, we are. We have developed a plan for that. We initially jumped right into that because we had that same concern. We were hearing from some parents, until there's a vaccine, I'm not bringing my child back. And so kudos to Fred and JB both, who immediately jumped into that before we even had any information from OSPI and started investigating how to do that. It's a very different model. They have designed something that we can briefly describe, but we are also hearing kind of mixed information, or frankly lack of information from OSPI as to how what were the requirements previously still be held up. But we do know that if we have folks who know they are not going to come back for a year, say, because they've already determined that's not going to work for them, we do believe we'll have an option for them. It will be based on enrollment because it will be a little bit of a different model, and we'll need to have the enrollment for that to be able to sustain it. So Fred or Jamie, which one wants to give a brief description of what that will look like?
Why don't I start it off and then Jamie jump in as well. We are forming essentially a what I think our public and would say is maybe a 7th school, if you will, and that's going to be My Online or MI Online. For all intents and purposes within the school district, it's just one of our offerings and continuum of services. But why I say that it's kind of like a separate school is, as Superintendent Koloski alluded to, it really is a commitment and an enrollment in this model, and it's not a moving back and forth between the typical school model and the online environment if students are enrolling full time, and that's really simply because of staffing. What we've typically offered at the high school will still be available, and that is we have some availability where students do take singleton classes, but The real change that we've made going into this school year is for the first time we'll actually be a K-12 program. And Jamie did some work with OSPI and just received approval last week that we can be a K-12 provider, which up until this point we hadn't been. And so through some quick work by her, we've cleared any pathways or any hurdles that we may face due to changing restrictions on ALE, alternative learning, and or online. So we positioned ourselves so that we can be the most nimble possible. But a couple attributes that I'd say that we're going to emphasize with the community before we put it out there and ask for people to choose whether or not they want to take advantage of this online environment is that it may or may not be with a Mercer Island teacher. It really depends upon whether or not we can staff it and we have the demand there. And then do we have the teachers who are teaching in the same courses? So it could be a third-party teacher that's part of Fuel Education or Edgenuity or one of our partners. The second piece I would say is that especially at the secondary, there are not as many options as the catalog in the Mercer Island School District, especially at the high school. So students need to be aware that while they may be accustomed to a specific classroom, international entrepreneurship or something, or certain AP class, those are not automatically available in the online environment. So we certainly want our students and our families to have eyes wide open going into it. But we also want to provide the options so that families can still stay part of the district and capitalize on the many great characteristics, attributes, and assets that we have right here in the Mercer Island School District. We will be coming out, Jamie and I will, with more information. We have a presentation that we're going to be putting forward to provide more information to families. We will be available to answer questions, and then we'll be asking families at a later date here in the next week or so to start committing if they wish to go with the My Online option. Again, for at least elementary, it's probably a year-long commitment. Middle school, we have a little more flexibility, and high school, the most flexibility, but it will be a commitment for a period of time, so it won't be as much going back and forth. Jamie, can you fill in some holes?
So previously, we were only able to offer students who, outside of our remote learning, students could only enroll in 50% of their schedule in online courses. And we only were able to offer it for upper middle school and high school students with the very few exceptions based on special services. So going K-12 provides us with more flexibility. But like Dr. Rendell mentioned, it's really going to depend on numbers. And at the elementary level, depending on how many students we have, we might have one teacher teaching multiple grades. We might be using content and curriculum from Edgenuity, or if there are specialty classes at middle and high school, we might be contracting out with other providers. And so I just think an understanding that it's not going to replicate the exact school day, and full-time online in My Online does not mean full-time in front of a computer screen from 8 to 3 or 9 to 4 or something like that. So understanding that it will also be a version of online learning, much like Red Learning, but it will be available for the entire duration of the school year.
And just adding on to that too, that you raised another point that I think is important for the community to know, and that is frequently in an online environment, it's not daily interaction with a teacher. It's kind of weekly interaction with online modules and asynchronous learning along the way. In fact, what you just heard in terms of the Red Learning, remote learning, that's more robust if a family's looking for more touch points with the teacher and interaction with the teacher than you get in an online environment. The younger the learner and our students with more potential needs for support, the younger the student there, the more support that a trusted adult needs to provide from home or a parent from home, because the students are really pretty autonomous, and you're looking at upwards of 60, 70, 75% of it needing to be the parent at home, and then the remaining part. So it's not as robust as one might think. But what it offers is if a family is really uncertain about their child being able to come to school at all during the school year, it still provides an option, and that the teacher is available and does some direct instruction. But I just want to, I don't want to overpromise something for our community, and they get into something that they don't want, and then we don't have space back in one of our other classrooms. So more to come on that. But Jamie, thanks for reminding me on that.
President Lurie, back to you.
Thank you. So board directors, I think because I imagine there's lots of questions. I'm gonna just see who wants to start off. And then after that one question, I'm gonna look to other directors to see if they have related follow-up questions to that issue, and then kind of go forward from there if that sounds good. And I am seeing Brian with a question, so go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for clarifying the online option, 100% online, because that was one of the questions I had, because there wasn't a lot of clarity around that. But the question I want to ask here is, when we look at the matrix, you refer to it as the flow chart for when we move between colors, which guidance will you be relying on to make those decisions? Are you using guidance from King County Public Health? Are you relying on what's happening in neighboring districts? What will go into the formula to decide that? And in full disclosure, our group of East King County directors has been discussing pressing King County Public Health for a specific matrix that would make that decision-making easy across the board, but as of yet, we don't have that. So who are your sources and what are you relying on to make that decision?
So just to add on to that, I can tell you that superintendents in the PSESD are making that same plea either to OSPI or to public health as well, to provide us that guidance as to, you know, what are the numbers that they feel really allow us to bring kids back safely in an in-person setting. They have a great website, and I know I'm popping onto it daily because you can see all of the different neighborhoods. Frankly, it goes to that granular of an area. But I know that there are some states that have made that designation of a county needs to be in this phase, or these numbers need to be in the area before schools reopen. So yes, we are looking to King County Public Health as a partner, of course, Department of Health. We do also consult almost daily with our colleagues around the region. Same 5 that you're talking to. Fred participates in a group that includes a couple others, some small ones. We're with the ESD at least 2 times a week as to what other districts are doing. We do know that that impacts our decision, just like it did back in March, as surrounding districts around us determined they needed to close. We made that determination as well before the governor made his announcement, based on how we were going to be able to support students and staff in that time. So our main look is to King County Public Health, who will also be our support if we are in person, and we have to report a case for COVID. So yes, that's where we're looking. We will also be complying with all of the guidelines and requirements as they are laid out in the OSPI Reopening Washington Schools document as well.
If I can follow up with a request on that. In a conversation last Friday with our peers in the region, I talked about a tipping point, that each district, based on its resources, its staffing, and public health, that we reach a certain tipping point that kind of forces our hand in certain decisions. So as that matrix is refined, my request is that we kind of clarify that with our own FAQ on the website so that parents can look at that, of what those tipping points look like, how it will trigger reactions within the flowchart.
Can you be a little bit more specific in what, Brian, in terms of what factors are this tipping point that you're referring to?
In some cases, it's a tipping point of staffing. If we have other districts that are closing down, which then impacts the staffing coming onto the island, then that would force us to close our doors, which is essentially what happened when we initially had to shut down the district. It wasn't, what guided that was that the closure of Seattle Public Schools and North Shore and all of that meant that we didn't have the staff coming to Mercer Island, and more than 70% of our staff comes from off island. So if that's one of the tipping points that would trigger a shutdown and a move into red, then just clarifying that in the FAQ. If King County, if we move to a model where it says, you know, if we're in phase 1, then we have to be in a red model. You know, what separates that orange? What outside data influences that shift in the flowchart between colors? I think the more information that parents have in the website around how those are triggered and how it happens, I think can ease a lot of concern and anxiety that they at least know what to expect. And sometimes it's out of our control. But just knowing how things are going to be triggered, how those dominoes fall, I think can at least provide some clarity and peace of mind for folks, even though we may not appreciate the answer being presented, right?
Thank you, Brian. Does any director have a follow-up or related question to?
Sure. I'd first like to start out by saying a huge thank you to the whole team. I'm sure there was upwards of 50 people plus involved in this, and this is a huge pivot from the online learning model we had last year, school year, to now. And I think it does take a moment to recognize that. I think I've got 2 kids in college now, and following that, and the fact that we've moved to a synchronous learning model across all grade levels, especially when we're in red mode, in the online mode, which is how we're going to start, I think is hugely compelling and a huge advance for the red model. So thank you. I think this is huge for our students. It's huge for our parents. It should really be recognized, you know, how big a pivot and change this is. And it doesn't come easy. And we should also recognize that as well, that this will be a large amount of work on our principals and teachers and parapros. It's great to see the parapros involved in all this as well. So I think we really, as a board, need to recognize what a large pivot and change that is for the Mercer Island educational system and the way we're delivering learning at a distance. So I thank you very much for that. And I think this model for online, as we're looking at what's happening in colleges, this is what's happening. Many colleges are going synchronous online only, and the fact that the school is doing this is great. Great way of doing it. I also super appreciate the fact that kindergarten, first grade, and special ed are going to be in person, and we're prioritizing our most in-need students to be in school, in classrooms, physically present. I think that is also a clear ask from parents as well. So I'm instead of asking a question, I will spend my time acknowledging the incredible work that the learning groups have gone through, and I appreciate it's no easy feat to get 50 plus people to agree on this type of model that I think will resonate with kids and parents, especially when we're starting with online learning. And finally, the last place to be is, it should be recognized that we've spent a lot of time trying to get COVID under control. The rates of COVID disease is spreading around King County. It's hard to keep it down. We have not had the 14 days of decreasing results, decreasing cases. Even on Mercer Island, we are at a high point in terms of COVID being spread. we're doing a great job of getting people tested, trying to keep people quarantined, tamping them down. You can see this in the daily results being presented. There are a lot of people being tested. There are more cases than we expected on Mercer Island at this point. So starting in red model has some value, and I can see why we're there. So I appreciate that we're making the red model comfortable and compelling and balancing the needs of our students. So thank you very much for that work.
President Lurie, could I clarify just a couple things just to make sure that I'm following? Do you mind?
Not at all.
First off is just kind of going back to those opening comments and to Director D'Souza, you know, as the longest standing board member, the one with the longest tenure, but certainly not old on that is just we appreciate your acknowledgement of the work that the teams are putting in, because I know not all districts have even some of their administrators on right now, and our administrators and teachers and paraprofessionals and parents have been engaged all the way through the summer so far. And I know that it feels like, you know, it's been a long summer already, but it's been just over a month that we've been out of school. And so, but they've been hard at it. I'd like to clarify two things. One is that right now, you know, we're pushing for kindergarten and our students with the most significant needs or acute needs, and then first grade would follow that. If we can push to get there, we certainly will on that. But Beth DeGrace or Sue Ann Booby, if you could just join in just for a second and just kind of talk in general terms about what you're thinking about what we mean or where we're thinking around our students with most acute needs.
Thank you, Dr. Rendell. This is Dr. Booby. So our teams are working on defining that. We met this morning actually, and trying to think about who is vulnerable. And you know, one of the tough things that comes out of this is all of our students are vulnerable right now. And how do we make those tough decisions? So we've started those conversations. A lot of it will come down to individualized meetings, and we're working on the types of questions that we should ask at those meetings. But we are prioritizing the health and safety of students, as well as trying to get them in person, not only for school, but for the evaluation pieces that we weren't able to complete in the spring. So we are prioritizing that as well. And alongside that, you know, there's a lot of work in aligning a new special ed model with the new gen ed model. So we have three, we have an elementary, middle, and high school gen ed model that now has to be aligned with special ed. So all of that work has happened simultaneously. But we are trying to nail down, like, what are those questions that administrators, parents, teachers should ask so that we can identify the most significant needs. And some students may need to come in all day, and other students may need to come in by appointment, depending on their IEPs and what that particular need is. And as we look at the OSPI guidance for students with disabilities, it does say that there's no one answer for any particular student, and that those teams are going to be important in moving forward.
Okay, thank you. I just I've got a follow-up question for what Fred just referred to. What are the factors or considerations that it will take? You're saying you're working on getting first graders into the school. What are the types of barriers that you're hitting that's keeping that from happening at this point, and what will it take to make it happen?
Superintendent Clossy, do you want me to take that, or do you want to start and then I'll jump on? After that, I'll defer to you.
The same factors of all the work that we're doing right now is based around the COVID. So it's the fact that we have to physically distance our students, which puts the numbers between that 14 to 16 range. And so, yes, if the bulk of our students are in remote learning, we do have facility access, but we also have to have staffing. So we more than likely are going to need to make some adjustments within our existing staffing as to how we would staff with more kindergarten classes and more first grade classes than we originally staffed. I'm thinking when Ty does his staffing sheets, you know, we're looking at what enrollment is and what's rolling up, and we're basing it on larger numbers than 14 to 16. And so it would involve using what we currently have as staffing across the system, and looking at how do we utilize that to meet the needs of our kindergarten and first grade. Fred, anything else?
No, I think that hits the main constraints. You know, as Principal Hoffman often reminds me, you know, Fred, let's do a few things really well and build some momentum, and then go from there. And if you know, we face the unfortunate problem in the spring of having to change every single aspect of schooling all at once without any opportunity to really think it through. We have that opportunity now, so let's do some things really well and then build momentum. It is a long school year, but I also empathize as a father of 3 kids, one in high school, middle school, and elementary. The at-home piece is extremely challenging, both from a student perspective and a child, but also as a parent trying to do this job and support them. So it's not without understanding that our parents are facing an uphill battle as well, but we want to do it well. And we know that we can build a RED system that is more robust, that delivers at a higher level. And there were some awesome things that took place this spring, and some innovation by some teachers that just blew me away. But we know as a system, we want to get better and not have it in pockets, but the whole system. So if we can start small and build, that's the goal.
Yeah. Tam, go ahead.
I have a couple of questions, but Maggie Ty, do you have a question? Because I have a list I want to go through.
Tam, we're gonna do it the way I suggested and ask one, and we'll check on follow-ups, and then we can come back.
You go first. There are like little detail lists, because we have like 20, like we have half an hour. And so I'd rather put it out there and then the administration can answer it. Otherwise, I don't think we're going to have enough time to go through all of these. But, or do you just want to go around, everybody just ask one question at a time?
I would rather, personally, I would rather questions and then hear answers rather than.
Okay, so then I'll ask one, kind of a general kind of, for the elementary plan, I assume that this goes the same for the high cap programs as well. They will be following the same model for the structure?
Yeah, yes, they will have their high cap teacher, and just like we did in the spring, they'll just be with this new model, but they still have their high cap teacher.
And then can I ask this, because this is still elementary, I have a like elementary question.
Let me just ask if anyone else has a question about high cap. Okay, go ahead with your next question.
So in the elementary, you said that it's site determined content. What does that mean when you put site determined content?
Well, all I'm saying is that we would leave it up to, of those 3-hour blocks, the site can determine whether they want to start with reading and then do math and writing. We're not going to dictate that every school has to start with reading, then every school has to do math, and every school has to do. So that would be within the school. But they will, the same essential content has to be covered, obviously, in all the schools. We just aren't going to say what has to happen in each hour.
Okay, that's helpful to know, because I did find the grid actually was really helpful. There's nothing wrong with the grid except that it was student driven instead of, you know, helping the students go through the grid. So I do, during this time, I would advocate for how to, as a whole district, we identify the essentials and then pare it down and be as consistent through all the different schools as much as possible. Instead of having, and we can teach it in whatever rotation, but it was really helpful, I think, across the board to know that the 4 elementary schools are all, you know, doing very similar things.
Yes, and that is our work ahead of us in the next couple of weeks, is to define those essentials for all the schools. Yep.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
Jump in real quick.
Oh, sorry, Donna, go ahead.
to David's point of that's the work, I know that that same work in identifying what's the online curriculum and standards going to be is also what we're moving forward with in the middle school and high school as well. So it's not just in isolation for, in fact, I know that Principal Kelly has already got some groups up and running that are going to be doing a lot of that content area work for the RED model. Sorry, Maggie Tai.
Oops. No worries. I wanted to say, first of all, welcome to Principal Kelly. And thank you very much to everyone who's been working so hard on, yes, everyone who's been working so hard on kind of brainstorming and communicating and emailing us and, you know, thinking about these issues. And I'm really impressed with the work that's been done. I want to just get clarification on that, as whether there's going to be like a grade, like a single curriculum, like a single set of topics and curricula for like, you know, all of the second graders, for example, all of the third graders, like last year's grid, or is it really going to be like more like it used to be, more of an individual teacher, you know, what they're assigning for that day? And the reason that I'm asking is because I know that there are families out there that are trying right now to make arrangements to get together, like families with working parents who are hoping to get together in pairs or threes or whatever to help the kids manage their online schooling. And if there's not going to be like a grade-wide grid, then those kids would need to be in the same class together for that to work. And I think since families are trying, and I know that for this year that the normal process of requesting to be in a class with someone or not be in a class with someone was suspended because of COVID. So I'm just wondering if you know yet that much about the curriculum, and if you can share that.
So we do have a district adopted curriculum, and our particularly for our elementary, the idea is that our teachers will still use those resources. Yes, I agree that having a pacing that would be similar across our system is desirable, and that is something that will have work that will need to be done in our PLCs, whether they are at the site level or at a district-wide level. Lots of professional learning and PLC work would go into what does that scope and sequence look like. But we will be using what is our current district adopted curriculum. And I don't know if David or Fred want to jump in with any.
Well, and I would just add that when I had mentioned that during that hour in each block, that just only a small portion would start out with the whole class. But then, yes, we absolutely want to individualize. That's where the breakout rooms would come into play. And I also mentioned we're going to do a lot of assessing, obviously, at the beginning of the year to see where each student is. We have to allow both some flexibility, but we also want teachers to work together. That's always a desire, even when we're in the building. So that's where that planning time and the collaboration is really important, so that we do meet every student's individual needs. That doesn't change. So
if parents are thinking about making one of these arrangements, would it make more sense for them to wait and see who their kiddo's in class with? And when will those class lists be announced?
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine the challenge and also there's some equity issues about people who can do that and people who can't do that. So I think we're moving forward with placing kids in classes. And like I said, there might be some opportunities to do some cross class work that could come, along the way. But I think that would just present a really, really big challenge to create, like we always say, we don't create classrooms by lacrosse teams or baseball teams. I think that's kind of the same principle here, is that we respect that people are doing that and they can still support each other. But I think we have to, I don't know, maybe Amy or somebody else can make that a little bit clearer, but I don't see that is going to be our top priority.
Of course.
Yeah, I think you explained the challenges. I would just add that one of the things that happens regularly at all of our elementary schools is that our grade level teams do engage in regular collaboration. And so, we would expect a lot more consistency and similarity in terms of scope and sequence, building by building. But we also want to recognize, as David said, that the needs of the children in front of me may be different than the needs of the children in front of David. And we want to make sure that our teachers have the opportunity and the space to make those professional choices to best meet their kids' needs. So it's that fine balance between, you know, a consistent scope and sequence with some essential standards in mind, and being able to bob and weave to best meet kids' needs. And, you know, to your point, it would be challenging to try to meet all of those individual kind of social pods or neighborhood pods. But we hope that because of that collaboration within the school and the grade level, you'll find that there will be a reasonable level of support, even if your kids aren't in exactly the same classroom.
Thank you.
The piece I'd add just quickly to that on the curriculum side is, and usually she's on these calls and is a diligent participant, and that is Stephanie John Lewis, Leslie Sherrick, and Mary Mullen have been the three kind of leads for the elementary summer school, working closely with other teachers and staff members. And we've been trying out a number of different other options that then we think would also be an enhancement coming up this fall. And whether or not that's an extension and continuing to use some of the curriculum that we've purchased as a supplement to help enhance the learning, those we would make available to everyone. Those wouldn't be just for certain teachers or certain programs. We'll be looking at full scale across all 4 elementaries to create that same consistency. And we're going to have a debrief on Monday. Summer school ends on Friday, but we're going to have a debrief on Monday. And I have to tell you, the innovation and the continuous improvement by this summer school team is going to not only, I think, provide a great support for kids this summer, but it's going to yield great benefit as well going into next school year. So we are constantly engaged in this continuous quality improvement and action research cycle, and some things aren't working, and that happened this spring. We've got to ditch those and continue to fail forward. So we're just at that.
Thanks.
It sounds like our youngest learners are going to continue to need more parental support or trusted adult support during the day, and in their learning, especially those that are not yet reading or not yet reading well. Are you planning, what are you planning for supporting parents in assisting their students in their learning?
So if you noted on the elementary schedule when it was shared, there was an actual built-in time and space where teachers will be available for that parent reach out and contact. We'll continue to always have the parent-teacher contact that we always have when we're in brick and mortar, whether it's via phone calls or email. But they've also built in a specific time where parents can communicate with teachers and work with teachers and work through those concerns of something that is or isn't working.
Okay, thank you. We heard a lot over the spring about differences in classrooms in terms of face-to-face interaction or different types of learning. Are you expecting to have the same challenges this fall, and what types of professional development are you planning to assist our teachers in providing the best online education they can?
So that comes, of course, with professional development. The sooner we can determine, I know Jamie's been giving me a pat, push, push, especially last week and this week, as to we need to make some determinations because we need to really determine where we're going to put our emphasis for our professional development in the time that we have between now and the start of school. So as to your question about what kind of practices will be in place, I think some of it's embedded in the schedules that you saw in and of themselves, and that they are more of a robust synchronous learning time. But we do need to provide teachers with all of the tools that are technical tools within Zoom. We heard that loud and clear, I think, from one of our high school teachers. Someone shared with me that they were having a discussion, and we shared, let's just move on. I need to know how to do this. Give me the training and how to do it. So we know we need to provide lots of robust training. And what are all these tools that you can use in this online model that will support your instruction for students. We also, you know, if anyone says that they've got the silver bullet for how online learning should look, I would challenge them a little bit. Particularly when you're talking about our elementary students, there is not a perfect model. There is not a model that rises above the others as this is the best way to do this online learning. We pivoted quickly in the spring. We have more time for this fall model. It still is going to have, as Fred said, some stumbling as we discover things that don't work and how do we best meet the needs of every student. Some of that's going to be on an individual basis. Much of that is. Some of it may be things we learn as we work through still more logistics on the technical side of this. I can tell you one of my greatest frustrations is just the bandwidth problem. We'll be in a meeting like this, and the larger the meeting gets, or the time of the day that it will be, we lose someone out of the meeting in the middle of them speaking, or you know, it just gets wonky and it freezes. I was in a meeting with 2 staff members today, and one just kept disappearing and then coming back and apologizing because his internet connection was going down. So those are challenges in online learning that, especially when you're in this synchronous, we want people to be able to have that best relationship possible in this setting. I think if we were to really talk about how we're going to address the whole child, then I would pivot the conversation a little bit more to what does that red-orange model look like, and how do we start to expand from here's the strict online learning that is the offering, and how do we then expand that into being able to serve the whole child and expand to those passions, those interests, those small group, those interventions, those remediations, all of those pieces then can become that in person when we're safely able to do that.
Jamie, do you want to jump in on the professional development side?
Yeah, I'll just throw out a couple of things. One, we've changed the way in which we're going to be providing PD for the startup of school this year. So before, we've had what's called an Instructional Technology Day. It's held on one day for 7.5 hours. And this year, we are trying to front load and open up those learning opportunities for staff beginning on August 10th, which is the first day of the new contract, so that they've got more time to digest, to problem solve, to question and plan using the PD that's created and generated by our staff. So that's going to be a change, and they're going to have opportunities there. We had 51 staff members across the district attend a Global Online Academy webinar about 3 weeks ago, and got some really good feedback from that. They're doing one now, especially for elementary schools. We've got a number of teachers and coaches who are participating in that. We've got some high school teachers who are exploring Stanford's online educational program, their online high school that's been in place for 16 years. There's an upcoming Harvard Graduate School series that will be offered to staff who are interested. And so there's so many different opportunities where we're trying to capture best practices. We're trying to figure out what it is that teachers need. And tomorrow, the professional development team is actually meeting for the first time intentionally, because we really wanted to see where we were going to be landing as far as each of the school level teams with their plans, and what the health department and the status of COVID-19 and where we are. I think had we had a meeting 3 weeks ago, we would have been planning for something very different than I think we're going to be planning for starting tomorrow. But we're really going to be assessing what are the imperative needs and skills that our teachers need in order to be able to launch something really robust in red and meet the needs of students. Taking in all the feedback that we've received about different platforms, consistency, accessibility, and then best practices, because for many of us, we weren't trained to teach in an online setting. And so figuring out what those best practices are and how to help leverage them for our kids.
Thank you. I want to jump back to Brian. Did you have another question?
Sure, I want to give an opportunity. I'm looking at Tony and Andreeves there. And so I have some questions around facilities and how we're going to keep our facilities safe. But also our capacity for technology and how prepared we are to offer hotspots and devices for the district.
So let's start with the tech piece first, Andrews.
Yeah, so based on some of the discussions that were happening in our Learning Forward teams, we are looking at moving to a one-to-one model across our elementary school. Previously, it has been one-to-one in grades 3 through 12. So we are looking to expand that down all the way to kindergarten. And to help facilitate not having shared devices, we went away from those sets of 8 in the kindergarten and first and second grade classrooms. We do have enough devices in the district to be able to do that, and so I haven't had to go out just with our normal refresh. That does mean that I'm not surplusing the devices that I normally would have this summer. So we're keeping those in the district to help facilitate that process. And then we do have the hotspots that we brought in the spring on contract throughout the rest of this year. So the plan is we will, as part of RSVP, parents will be asked if they have sufficient internet access and devices at home, or if they would like the district to provide that. And we do plan on having those resources available for our families throughout next year.
Mom, we're leaving.
Related, what are we doing for teacher technology needs?
We've had a lot of discussions around teacher technology needs as well. And we are looking at tools that will help facilitate, potential live broadcasting of lessons or recording. We still need to have more discussions around what that process would look like, but we are certainly exploring tools to help facilitate that. In addition, we explored Styli for the iPads in the spring as another tool to help teachers provide feedback for students. And then we're also exploring some additional instructional tools, not necessarily learning management systems, but other tools that can be incorporated within our learning management solution to help provide additional resources and feedback tools for teachers.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if there were any related follow-up questions, but if you have something to add, please do.
I was just going to pivot to facilities, but let's finish technology first.
I do have a technology question. So what is kind of like, Andrew, the timeline to order, equipments? Because I know for me, I ordered something 3 months ago, a camera, and it hasn't come yet. So I think this is really great that we're able to have this conversation now. And it sounds like you're saying that we have to make decisions so we can order. And so part of one of my questions I want to ask later on, but now I'll bring it up because it's technology related, is like, what is our challenges and barriers to do live streaming from our classrooms, right? Because I feel like a lot of our current curriculum is based on the assumption is either if we go to the classroom, then we're going to have asynchronous learning at home. But then I also hear that when we do that, there might be less instructional time. And so if we're talking, let's say later on, more of an option to live stream from the classroom, do you think that's something that our budget can handle if each of the classroom have a really big screen TV? Because I'm teaching more of a high flex for my classes next semester. And and that would be more of a seamless transition from online to when we go back to the classroom. And based on kind of ordering right now, do you think, what's the timeline if we were to make those kind of decisions to make it happen?
Yeah, timelines for receiving equipment vary greatly depending on the product. We are competing with schools across the world for a lot of these products, as so many districts out there are having these same discussions. We have went ahead and placed our orders. I typically place them in June for the equipment that I normally order. But another thing that I've done this year to anticipate this is ordered additional iPad keyboards, things like iPad stands to help facilitate some of that live streaming that you're referring to, as well as additional cases. So for the K1 one-to-one program, but it really varies. If you start looking at things like webcams, the availability for a product like a webcam is very low right now. And so it really depends on the product itself. And then the other thing that I would add is, you asked about the capabilities and what technical challenges we might have in regards to live streaming. If we're talking about streaming as in a from the classroom to the home model, I don't think that there's many challenges that would, I think we could meet that need. I think where we really start struggling is the amount of participation we want coming back to the teacher. And whether or not we're getting into a full presence type scenario, or whether it truly is trying to just one-way stream from the classroom to the students that are learning online. It's really about that collaboration and that participation piece coming back. And those are a lot of the discussions that we're having within our Learning Forward teams.
I can share that one thing we have ordered is we know that when we are back in person, everyone's going to have to wear a face covering. And many of our classrooms do have an audio sound system, but many don't. So Tony and Ty have been working on getting more of those. So when we are able to be back in classrooms, teachers will be wearing face coverings, and they will also then have an audio sound system. You wear it around your neck so that it makes them easier to be heard rather than muffling with the face masks. I anecdotally can share that when I was an elementary principal and opened a new school, we were fortunate to have those sound systems put in every classroom. And one of the benefits to that was my school started to have less absenteeism from teachers for sore throat and illness. We were able to track it because they were just, as a teacher, your voice gets worn out. And so that was one plus to that. So we felt that when face coverings do go away, I'm going to be optimistic that having those sound systems will still be a great tool for our staff to be able to have.
The other thing that I could add as well, in terms of technology, Donna shared a little bit earlier about some frustrations with bandwidth, just as so many people are now online trying to access resources. This summer, we are in the process of doubling our internet capacity here within the district, understanding that that's not going to help families that are accessing remotely and at home, but just trying to build capacity so that as we shift towards a orange or yellow model, we can continue some of these practices that we're developing in a remote model. Because quite frankly, some of them are very valuable and can be used even as we shift into green.
Ready for facilities?
I think so. Yes. Thank you.
So I think I remember your question, Brian. You were asking about safety concerns as we move forward, and of course we're stockpiling PPE as much as we can. We are working with the custodians on custodial, our different types of disinfecting supplies. We purchased some disinfecting machines, which is an electrostatic machine that will treat the schools with after hours. We are in the process of building plexiglass shields for people that are up front and center throughout the buildings. Right now, we're building those in-house with the maintenance staff. I think we've got two or three of the schools done so far. For the first pass, we're where there'll definitely be more as we move on, but we want to make sure we get the front office and the counselors protected right off the bat. So I wasn't sure how specific or where, if there was something specific you were looking for in that question, or I mean, we're moving forward and we're anxiously waiting for, the direction to getting this kicked off of the starting block. So
one of the questions that I've had posed is about ventilation, and so Tony and I have talked about that. We can pump, as Tony says, a lot of fresh air into our buildings, but and he's ordered extra filters so that we're able to change those out frequently, because as more science evidence becomes available on what is causing the spread of this virus, what are the more high risk pieces versus the lower risk, we now know that it's the aerosolization, and how do we keep that to a minimum. One way is face coverings, another one is good ventilation. Just be forewarned, Tony reminded me of this, that we can pump lots of air, but as the weather gets cooler and colder, we will be pumping lots of air, but we won't have the time to necessarily heat it, particularly in our schools that have those old boilers. It takes longer to heat that air. So my response was, we will all be dressing in plenty of layers, which I've been known to traditionally do anyways once we hit that cooler weather. Tony, anything else on ventilation that I missed?
No, I thank you for bringing that up. And we have been going around. We've actually been working with our controls company on how to better some of our older facilities, to how we can really increase that outside air. We've also tried to increase the amount of filtration with the types of filters we're putting in. Unfortunately, we can only go so high in some of the older units because it will actually restrict the flow. But it still falls within the range of the recommendation of the MERV 9 to 13, or 8 to 13, excuse me. So, but we're trying to do everything we possibly can for that as well.
Do we think about plexiglass around the kids and/or around teacher stations?
So we did talk about that, and the Department of Health and the CDC, putting plexiglass around the kids really is not a solution to the problem. It's not helping with the transmission. With the way we have the classroom set up, it's nose to back of head, lack of better description, I guess, and having that 6 foot with the proper mask. If the state came out and was very clear that they wouldn't accept plexiglass to reduce that 6 foot separation, we had tried that early on. Donna and I took a walk over to Northwood and we had some great ideas, but unfortunately the state was ahead of us on that. So,
do you have any concerns about your ability to keep our staff, specifically kindergarten staff and students with special needs, safe, assuming those groups are able to return to the building?
So we've worked really closely in the kindergarten classrooms. We've been through the buildings. I think the numbers that Donna has shared, the 14 and 16, I feel pretty comfortable with that. The high need students, we've had some conversations, or I've had some conversations with both Sue-Ann and Beth. We're meeting again, hopefully this next week, to kind of solidify what that's going to look like. As it sits right now, I feel pretty good about it. I really do. Until we get a hard plan, I guess it's hard to really go too far out on a limb. I think in the high needs area, it's going to be I don't know what the numbers are going to look like in that program at any given time. If we were going to match the numbers that we had back in September of last year, yeah, it might be a little bit tricky just because of the amount of students we have in those small spaces and the types of services that they're being served with. But I think with the right management, we should be fine. And again, the right PPE. We've been working closely together on making sure we get the right PPE for those staff members.
I think it's really important to remember that the Department of Health guidelines are what they're calling layered guidelines. So an example of that is, we know that if we have 14 kids sitting in desks and they're all facing forward, there is going to be times when the teacher is going to be less than that 6 foot. But it's that small amount of time. I think our nurse reported at our last health and safety meeting that and we happen to have a local pediatrician on that group as well, that it's a 15-minute is what the Department of Health has kind of outlined as that briefer interaction, particularly if you're practicing all of the other precautions such as face coverings, is going to be lower risk than the long term of an hour or 3 hours in a situation with people who aren't practicing the physical distancing and wearing the face coverings. Some things that we also need to make sure that people are aware of is we will have very limited entrance to our school sites, just like we do at our district office right now. It will be staff and students only. We will not be opening our doors to everyone. Anyone who's coming into the building will need to go through that health attestation that we've discussed. We'll need to have a face covering. We will provide face coverings for students and or staff that aren't able to bring their own. We will also have reminders and time built in for hand washing. It's something that every kindergarten teacher does every year without a COVID of teaching 5-year-olds, and again, when they're in first grade, 6-year-olds, you know, how to wash their hands, but it's going to be even more prevalent, and we'll be dedicating time to that and making sure that there's access for that and everyone has reminders of it. And frankly, we're going to put those personal hygiene signs up everywhere. Did you wash your hands for 20 seconds? Just to get everyone into those good hygiene habits. That is part of the guidelines and regulations that are built into the Department of Health and the L&I guidelines as well.
Can I just ask whether Tony or anybody has been thinking about teachers' exposure to each other? So for example, where are the teachers going to eat lunch? They can't just sit in the staff room and take their mask off and eat lunch, you know?
Yeah, you're actually right. More of the information we're getting now is adult to adult contact is higher risk than adult to our youngest student, is what some of the evidence is showing. And so we have had the conversations around, an example being staff meetings. Even if some staff are in the building, more than likely we will continue to use Zoom so that staff doesn't congregate in places. We will have to have lots of reminders of staff rooms aren't available for congregating to eat. We'll have to provide small individual spaces for that, because again, it's that taking the mask off and eating causes concerns for the risk of transmission going up. So yes, we are working through those adult congregation areas across our system, whether it's at our school sites, here in the district office, everywhere, where we have to make sure that we're being really cognizant of that for everyone.
Deborah, I had just 2 more really quick things. One was, I just wanted to say to whoever is making the determination about whether or not the second graders would go onto a new platform or stay with the younger kids on Seesaw, that I hope that you are going to be reaching out to the families that got to try the new platform this summer. Like specifically, if you had rising second graders using that Google Classroom or whatever it was, that you'll reach out and just see what their experience was. That was number 1. I don't need an answer to that. Number 2 is how, at every level, what is the district planning to do to reach out to kiddos who just are not engaging, kiddos who are just not attending class or not handing in their assignments? What's the plan for reaching out to them?
So built into our plan will be really similar, particularly at the high school, because that's where the contact really becomes to the student versus the parent. You know, our high school SIP last year had a reference to every student feeling like they had a trusted adult in the system. And Principal Kelly and I have had that conversation, is in a fully remote model, how do we make sure that every student is has a trusted adult in this remote setting? And how do we make sure that kids are being given that gentle nagging when they're not having their attendance taken in the daily contacts that we've set up in the attendance model. So we will definitely have staff that will be allocated to those contacts continuously in modes that particularly our adolescents will hopefully respond to, whether it's texting, whether it's phone calls, you know, making it as nagging as possible to get them to respond. Our high school did a fabulous job last year, particularly our counselors, and this gives me an opportunity to really quickly say, welcome Jeff Jones to our leadership team as our new associate principal, who I know will be working with our counselors to really put that in place, that kids have someone who is reached out to them.
Tam?
So if I can go back to the middle school, high school, the curriculum. So I guess I want to, in normal time, how many hours of instruction are our kids getting? Because based on the middle school, especially time, it seems like 45 to 12. Then after that is just office hours and optional kind of activities. But the core of the instruction is only from, so that's about 3 hours. So is that normally how our kids are getting amount in normal time? And just because we dragged it out with a lot of in between, and now we condense it, and then it's only every other day that they're getting this. So I guess I would like information about that, and also how this is tied to. Again, I keep hearing that when we switch to a hybrid model, that it is going to reduce the number of hours, instructional hours that they would get with the teachers. And that is really concerning for me. So I hope that I love the synchronous model that we are at right now, but I also hope that as we are fine tuning this, that we are coming to a model that our students can seamlessly be at home and still have that face time, be engaged in the classroom. And so then we really start to think about, an in-class model with live streaming option, because this, I know next year it's going to be condensed time, but I think parents are really going to be concerned just looking at this 8:45 to 12. And after lunch, it doesn't seem like, and this is like my son in 8th grade, it seems like he would probably be like, oh, I'm free. And so I just kind of want to understand more about the middle school and high school instructional hours.
I'll be glad to respond on the high school level, Tam. The instructional hours that we're proposing on the red model are approximately 15.5 per week. If you think about a traditional schedule, it's approximately 15 hours. So the instructional time, the live instructional time, is actually very equivalent. Monday is shorter, but then the others have more time because we are not dealing with all the transitions and some of the other factors that are going on. So I'd say, on the red model, it's very equivalent as far as in-face direct instructional time.
Thank you. How about for the middle school?
For the middle school, we definitely are seeing kids less time than we would have seen them before, because we're doing 3 periods a day instead of 6 periods a day. The continuous time or meeting with them more regularly than we did in the spring is something that we're looking for, but we're also considering asynchronous as well as synchronous. So we don't want parents to think that because teachers are only seeing their kids 3 times in the week, that means that that's the only instruction that they are getting. So we're really trying to consider the flipped classroom. We want to use that Monday as a time to lay out the learning for the week so that kids know and that we teach and help support them on how to organize themselves for the week. And we really see that work time in the afternoon not as optional. We see that as essential, because kids will need to be doing tasks either in preparation for the next day or in response to the learning from the day that they just experienced. And that's why we couched office hours at the beginning and the end of that work time. So as kids are working, they can access teachers, then paras, then teachers again to support their learning. So we want to make sure that that does not feel optional. It is not how we are laying out our time for kids. And Aaron or Weston, I don't know if you want to build on that anymore.
I don't have anything really to add to that. I think we also have, if you add up that 8:45 to noon time, that's about 15 hours as well of time, similar to what Walter is talking about.
And to add, there is a lot of instructional validity to the asynchronous piece of it. I realize that on the other side of it, from a parent standpoint and a live interaction standpoint, the synchronous piece has some, at least perceptual advantages, but I want to reinforce also what Mary Jo is saying. There is a lot of evidence for the asynchronous part for virtual learning being a positive.
I know there are lots more questions. It is 5:01. I want to respect everyone's time. And we do have another study session on Thursday, this Thursday, the 23rd, from 9 a.m. till 12 p.m. The plan was to use at least an hour of that to continue this conversation, knowing that it was unlikely we were going to get through everything. And frankly, we're not going to get through everything. It's going to be ongoing. So I want to thank everyone for participating. We know that you've been putting in long hours during these summer months, some who were expecting to be working in the summer and some who were not. So we do appreciate all of it. I will leave it up to Donna and Fred and Learning Services to determine who will be joining, if anyone else will be joining us on Thursday for more questions. And I guess I'm trying to think if we should plan it for the first hour or the last hour of our study session. Does anyone have any strong feelings?
I would prefer the first hour.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. That sounds reasonable.
Okay, so we will plan on continuing these questions and answers for the board at 9 a.m. on Thursday the 23rd, and then we will be moving to continue our discussion regarding the fundamentals. And again, on behalf of the board, would like to thank all of you for participating. We know there are going to be many, many, many more meetings and questions to come. And look forward to seeing what we can achieve for all of our students. So it is 5:03 and we will adjourn.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Deborah.